Hi friends, welcome to lesson 4 of our oil pastel sunflowers that we're doing in the style of the Dutch artist Vincent van Gogh. So the same supplies are required for this lesson as with all of our other lessons. Your drawing so far, your set of pastels, baby wipes, and paper towels to protect your drawing. So Vincent van Gogh had, as we have learned already, kind of a rough start to his young adult life because he wasn't quite sure what he was supposed to do. But once he made the decision to become an artist and to share his creativity with the world, that was a way in which he served God, which had been his aim from the time he was a young child. He just wanted to serve God and do what God wanted him to do. He just didn't know what it was for quite a while. But once he did, he went at it with a vengeance. And he drew and drew and painted quite a lot, 900 paintings in just 10 short years. And that's really remarkable. But Van Gogh was never really totally very happy. His letters reveal that he was very insecure and concerned and sometimes just downright sad. And he never really had that fulfillment or joy that he so desired. And he did have some mental health issues that required him to stay in the hospital several times. But Van Gogh did continue to paint all throughout his illnesses. In fact, his most famous painting came from when he was having a hospital stay at the St. Remy Hospital. And here it is, it's Starry Night. And it's a remarkable painting. He painted it from inside his hospital room right through the window as he looked out into the village below. And he looked out at this starry night, and look at these amazing colors and this beautiful large Italian cypress tree in the foreground and the swirls of light around the moon and the stars. It's really an incredible painting. And to know that he did this masterpiece when he was still recuperating from an illness is pretty incredible. He never gave up. And he realized that one of the few things that gave him immense joy was to continue to paint, because that's what God had designed him to do. Now we're going to continue to work on our sunflowers. We're not using oil paint, however. We are using oil pastel, so we can still get that thick application of color in short, small strokes, which is exactly what we see here in Starry Night. Short strokes with thick paint, and the colors aren't blended. They just optically blend with all the colors being next to each other. When you look closely at Starry Night, you see a lot of colors right next to each other, stroke for stroke. And that's what we're going to do in this last section of our oil pastel of sunflowers, adding in some additional color details to really make the composition be striking. So let's get going. Now get your paper towel handy, put it underneath so you don't smudge your oil pastel. That's one thing about oil pastels. They can be very smudgy, but if you're careful, it can be great. So we worked on our urn last time where we added in some values, but now we want to add in even more highlights and more shadows to really make it stand out. So find something that looks like a peachy tone and white. Now have those both handy because we're going to use those to create the lightest value in our urn. We'd already talked about our light source coming from the right. And so if you go over here to the urn, there's going to be some really glossy highlights. That's going to be the lightest value. But then because the urn turns, there's darker values on the edges and it's a lighter value in the center, and that's what creates that volume, that form. So the first thing I'm going to do is take my peachy color, and in the center section I'm going to add right over the red some horizontal strokes of this peachy color. You notice I'm just making strokes. I'm not being concerned about if they overlap or whatnot. I'm just mixing them in with that red right in this center here. But only go up on the vertical sides of the urn. Don't go up into that slanted part quite yet. Now because I'm doing this, see how all the red pastel is coming out on my peach pastel? So I definitely want to make sure I clean it before I put it back in that box. So I'm going to clean my pastel of the peach. Now on this sloped part where the neck forms, right, we have this slope that goes in and then that flare that goes out. We're going to see some highlight, some lighter parts on this flare, but not on the underside because that's in shadow under the leaves. So just here clean off my pastel and return it to my set. And now my white, which is my lightest value. You're almost going to create what seems like a stripe. And that's where the light is bouncing off the high gloss of the ceramic. So you're going to be a little more careful so that you can kind of keep it in line. Start at the vertical part, not the neck, and make nice, strong, so press hard, all the way down, almost so it looks like a stripe. Turn your pastel if you have to, all the way down like this, keeping your strokes horizontal. Clean off your pastel. Now on the part where the urn slopes, you're going to do the same thing, but just a little lighter. Not as, don't press as hard. Just a little lighter, like that. And that gives us that white highlight of where the light hits that ceramic. I'm going to take my original red, and every here and there, just every here and there, I'm going to add in a red stroke. Then it doesn't look so stripy. There we go. So the urn is pretty much done. We have our dark values and our light values. But as an artist, this is where it's so important, my friends, to observe and decide what choices you want to make. If you want to make the shadows or the edges of the form even darker, you can do that. You can add in purple. You can add in dark green. Just on the very edges where you want that form to really look like it wraps around there and is much darker. So I'm just keeping my strokes short, horizontal, and unblended, like that. Now we're ready to move up with some of our darker shadows in our flower section, and this is an important step. One of the things I always ask my students to do every once in a while is to step away from your artwork so you can look at it from a different vantage point. So I'm going to hold up my drawing and I'm going to stretch out my arm and look at it from a distance. Now this is really important to do because once you do that, aha, just like Cleopas and his friend finally saw Jesus, I'm now seeing that I don't have enough definition in this flower here to make it really pop out. I need to do something more with the negative space around those petals. I didn't see it when it was right here, but now I can tell. So I'm going to take this dark mossy green and this rusty brown. And with these two, these earthy tones and this, the darkest thing in the orange family, this deep rusty brown and the deep dark green, I'm going to make some small strokes in that negative space of the green right now where there would be foliage so that I can press and really make kind of those petals stand out. Because the foliage is tucked underneath the flowers, they don't get a lot of light on them. So even though the light is shining this way, these petals of the flower are bright. But the foliage that's tucked under would be in more shade. And that's why it's okay to go back into this negative space and add in these darker values just by stroking over where we already had it. Same thing here. We already were in that negative space with a lighter green. Now go in with this darker green. And even on my stem, makes those petals stand out. With the rusty brown, where you have petals on top of additional flowers, again, to show that layering, I'm going to want to add in dark values in the negative space to try and make those brighter petals stand out. So this is our focal point flower, this tallest one here. And so around those petals, even right over this flower we already drew, I'm making some of these darker orange strokes to really make that sunflower stand out. I'm going right over what I've already drawn, like that. Even right onto the leaf, that's fine. You're creating this shadow. I still want this to stand out more. So I think I'm going to take this dark orange, making some Again, stay with your small strokes. Don't change your style just because we're at the end here. By adding, still in that same color family that we've been working, golds, orange, yellow. Stay in that same family for your sunflower. Add in where you need to put in some extra details to make each flower stand out. They don't have to look the same. None of Van Gogh's sunflower paintings look the same, and each sunflower in that painting looks totally different. So that is okay. Some can be more orange, some can be more pale yellow. I think that's better. But there's this kind of a weird spot here where these two flowers that are facing backwards, where we see the light underside of their petal, there's kind of this weird space there. I'm going to make that foliage, so I'm going to add in some green. I'm going to use this yellow green here. I'm going to try that first, see how that looks. If I need to darken it, I can. Again, it's kind of a negative space. It's between objects. Yeah, that makes a difference right there. And then I'll take a few, put in a few dark strokes. Great. Starting to get there. Now I'm still not finished with the buttons. The button center, I need to add some more color to that. So where we left that dark brown, I'm actually going to take this really dark blue and just on the very edges add in some dark blue so that I don't see any of my paper coming through. And then, after I clean this pastel, I'm going to get the very dark red maroon. Put a few dabs, strokes of color right on top to darken up those buttons. And then the last thing I think I want to do, because when I look at these center buttons, there's just a hint of gold, as if it's like right on the edges. So take that goldish tan that you have in your set, right over top, right in the very center, a few strokes. So it still is a dark center button, even though we're adding gold. Great. Now, some of that gold color from the flowers, when I talked about two objects that are very close together, some of their light reflects onto objects that are near them. So some green will reflect on the flowers and some gold will reflect on the leaves. So take your goldish pastel and put a few strokes on your leaves of this goldish color. Like that. Trying to keep your spade shape and always working out so you create that sawtooth effect. And now the last thing that I want to do to create some more interest, I don't want to keep my background that flat single color of blue, because Van Gogh never kept anything a single color. He always added layers of paint to make rich color. So I'm going to take my darker blue and I'm going to do the same thing we did when we did our background of horizontal strokes, starting at the urn and working out. Not exactly in the same space, but overlapping with that light blue. So up against my edge of my urn, horizontal strokes right over that light blue that I have, just to create some interest like this. And when you get really close to the leaves and the actual sunflower petals, you just slow down and be just a little more careful so you can keep that distinct shape. And like I said, as an artist, you make choices. Maybe you wanted to add in purple strokes or something like that. You don't have to do exactly what I'm doing. In fact, you can even add a third layer of color. But keep the background cool colors to contrast nicely with the warm colors of our sunflowers. Staying with my horizontal lines, small strokes. Is your hand getting tired? Has that ever happened to you when you've worked on a project and your hand's in the same position for a while? That's normal. Shake it out, give yourself a break, and then come back to it. you imagine? 900 paintings Van Gogh made. 14 of them were sunflowers. He also painted a lot of self-portraits. Of course, he was a subject matter that was always around, and he had a mirror in his room. And so when he was at a loss of what to paint, or if it was a rainy day or his flowers were wilting, he would just do a self-portrait. Van Gogh is one of the artists, Rembrandt was another, Frida Kahlo was another, who painted a lot of self-portraits. So we have a really great record of what Van Gogh looked like because he painted himself so much. He was a redhead, and he had a beard and blue eyes. So you're going to continue to make these small horizontal strokes kind of overlapping, shades of blue. And after you get through all this negative space with adding in this second layer of blue, see how it's making these sunflowers and the urn really pop right up against our table surface here. Clean my pastel before I return it to the set. I have a couple more here. You can always add in a third color. I would probably not do too much color. I would probably add in something like a gray, something that doesn't take away from the beautiful blue too much. Just a few strokes here and there for visual interest like that. And you don't even have to do it all over the whole background. So this table surface we have here, we already added in some additional marks. And we want to add in some last-minute highlights on the flowers themselves. Let me show you this great painting that Van Gogh did called Still Life with Imperial Crowns. It's a type of flower. It's not sunflowers, it's a different kind of flower. But look at that table surface. Look at how many small strokes he had on that table surface and darker marks under the urn to show where that urn was sitting on the table. So that's what we're going to do now. We're going to add the very darkest marks under the urn before we finish up with our white. So take the darkest brown you can find in your set, and right on the left side of the urn, make small strokes that hug against the urn, and then underneath it, horizontal again, just on the left, and underneath on the left side. When you hit that white stripe of highlight, stop. Don't go any further than that. That's kind of our darkest shadow to show that the urn is sitting down on the table. And now with our white pastel, we're going to finish up with some great highlights. So on these flowers here that we're seeing the underside of, that's a really, really light value. We're going to use our white pastel, and on the very edges, make some small strokes heading down towards that center where they all started from. That makes it a much lighter value. You're going to have to clean your white pastel more frequently because you want to make sure you really get white where you want it. And now on the very tips, that little V at the tip of each petal, you're just going to do almost like a little V of white over the yellow. So it's the very lightest value. On the focal point sunflower, just kind of that top where the light comes in, and then just a few where it overlaps the under petal. And then this one, this flower, you're going to do the same thing on these edges. So it's a much stronger white. Like that's what's the lightest value. And on this petal that's, on these petals of this sunflower that's turned a little bit on the outer edges, again, small strokes that are almost like a V on the edge of each petal there. Okay. Poor Vincent van Gogh was plagued with a lot of stress and anxiety through most of his life. No one's really sure why, But we do know, especially evident in the many letters that still survive that he wrote to his brother Theo, that he really was anxious about the quality of his work, about his paintings. Would anyone really like him? Would anyone be his friend? And so he had a lot of anxiety. And it reminds me of very many passages in Scripture about anxiety, but one is found in Psalm 94. Let me read it to you. You know, Van Gogh struggled to find joy. And in Psalm 94, it says in verse 19, "When anxiety was great within me, your consolation brought me joy." See, Van Gogh, who loved the Lord and really wanted to serve him, was never quite sure how he could find that joy that would escape the anxiety that he felt. Now, he did know that his best release was to paint, and that probably brought him the most joy. But he suffered from anxiety for all of his life, and it really plagued him, which is sad, because that Scripture says that when we put our total trust in God, knowing that He is beyond any circumstances we have here on earth, just knowing that consoles our soul and gives us joy, and knowing that God has a plan for us that's far greater than anything that we can imagine, and that we have to put our total trust in Him, that He will guide our path. And that should bring us joy. I don't know if Van Gogh had that consolation from the Lord. I know he loved the Lord in his earlier life and wanted to serve Him with everything that he had. And he had such amazing genius as an artist. We know that that gift came from God, the Master Creator. So I hope that he had that consolation of being close to the Lord, especially when he went to be with Him at the end of his life. So you as an artist can make some additional choices about additional shadows or highlights. And by adding layer upon layer with the oil pastel, you get that same effect that Vincent van Gogh had when he put on that luscious, rich oil paint in layers and thick strokes on all of his many masterworks. He has so many paintings for us to enjoy. I hope you check it out when you can, because he was really one of the most compelling artists of our modern age. Well, I hope you enjoyed working on this sunflower project in the style of Vincent van Gogh, and I'll see you for another See the Light art project.